Hi guys, it's Oak here, and I just want to make a video about stimulation addiction, because we often think about certain things as being addictive, like it may be drugs or food or sex or certain particular things, but more and more I've been thinking that stimulation itself is addictive. And of course there's no way to avoid stimulation because that's just part of life. But when you start to look at it that way, it becomes quite interesting. So if we are stimulated in any way, it could be quite often through visual imagery or something like that. Our body, mind, and our brain in particular responds to that by releasing chemicals, and that puts us in a certain physiological state. And as we've become a more mentally dominated species and people, we're getting this high stimulation activation without the diffusion of the energy that gets created in that process. And of course, if that energy isn't diffused, it embeds itself in our body in various forms, such as muscular tension and ongoing neurotic thought processes. So I just wanted to get you thinking about how this might work by examining a few different activities and contrasting the level of mental stimulation that they cause with the ability of your body to diffuse that energy. So if you get a lot of stimulation, your body will gear up because traditionally when we were hunter-gatherers, stimulation, typically a high stimulation would mean a threat to your survival. The most highest stimulation times would be when there are predators around, when you're hunting, or when something has changed dramatically in the environment and you need to respond in order to survive. Nowadays, we don't really have any predators, and so we have the same physiology that's designed to respond to those threats to our survival, but there actually are very few genuine threats. So here I've got the activity that we're going to discuss, and then the degree of mental stimulation and the ability, and I forgot the Y there, energy, physical energy diffusion. So the first one, video games. So you're sitting at a computer. These games are extremely rapidly moving images, lots of colors, lots of sounds in rapid succession. So what would you imagine would be the degree of mental stimulation? And anyone who's played an intense video game knows that it's like a barrage, and it's very entertaining and very fun and addictive, but at the same time it is causing some kind of a physiological response, as if you're in, say, a fighting game or a game where you're shooting at people and being shot at. It can often sort of create that feeling in the body that this is a genuine situation, that, you know, I have to survive, and that's sort of what happens to the body. So here we have video games. So we're going to say that the mental stimulation is high. But because we're just sitting at a desk, the ability of the body to diffuse that energy that's generated is low. We are physically passive and mentally overstimulated. Physically passive and mentally overstimulated. So the energy diffusion is low if you're just sitting there playing a video game. An action movie, similar kind of circumstance, or it could be a thriller or a horror or something like that. You're sitting still, you're being exposed to images which are designed to get you revved up. In the thriller, it's like something's going to happen, something's going to happen. There's the music and everything is designed to create that kind of tension. What is that tension? It's your body's physiological response to basically a simulation of a dangerous situation or environment. So once again, action movie, there's a high mental stimulation. And because you are physically just sitting still, there is a low diffusion of the energy. See a pattern here with things that are physically sedentary but mentally highly stimulating. You can see how it's problematic. So let's move on a bit. Now there's another one. If you are bored, it's quite a common problem for people to do eating, or stressed as well, like comfort eating. And this is using a different sense. This is not the visual thing from the video games and the movies. So it's your taste buds that are getting stimulated, right? Now, it's actually, I mean, people love to eat. It is, you couldn't say that it's not a highly mentally stimulating thing, especially when the flavors are so varied and intense, as they tend to be more and more with the diets that we have. So it's a very, very stimulating experience. So we'll put high for that. Some might say medium if you're eating something that's not so exciting. And once again, unless something's done, once the food is settled, unless you may go and exercise to diffuse that energy, but if you just eat for the stimulation, for how it's making you feel and the way it's affecting your brain and your brain chemistry, and you don't actually do anything physical, then we have another imbalanced situation where you're getting a lot of stimulation through that taste sense, and then you're just sitting on the couch or sitting around and there's no physical expression for that energy. So drugs. Now, the drugs one's a bit more interesting because there are different kinds of drugs. So some of them will basically reduce your level of stimulated state. But a lot of the ones that people find quite addictive, and I'm not just talking illegal drugs, I'm talking things like caffeine and tea obviously also has caffeine in it, but so stimulant drugs, you can imagine that is a huge way that you can get a massive amount of stimulation of your mind and body without actually having to move your body at all. So I could just be sitting around, have 3 cups of strong coffee, and all of a sudden I have this boundless sort of energy. But if I'm just sitting in an office cubicle, where's that energy going to go? Is it going to be beneficial? Am I going to be able to diffuse that energy that I've created through consuming this drug? And that applies to amphetamines and speed and cocaine and any other kind of stimulant drugs. So once again, high mental stimulation. Now this is also stimulating your body, but unless you do something with that energy, it's not going to help. It's going to create a imbalanced situation in your body-mind system. So if you have a cup of coffee and then do a workout, I'm not going to tell you that that's inherently bad, because you are actually doing something to use up that energy. But if you're just going to go sit down in front of a desk, I would suggest be very careful with what you're doing there, with balancing your mental stimulation with what you're doing with your body. So we'll just put that low. So you can see with those ones, they're known as being potentially problematic when it comes to addictions. Now I want to shift gears a bit and I want to move into some of the healthiest activities that we can do, and why, from this perspective of stimulation addiction, why they might be as healthy as they are and such great activities. So let's start with something sort of moderate, something that's not too crazy, and that's just walking. So I'm going to call that a moderate mental stimulation. Now you may be thinking, no, I think it's low mental stimulation. But when you're out walking, there may be cars around, there's probably going to be other people, there could be animals, there's going to be wildlife, and so your mind is taking in a lot of information and processing that. it's nothing like compared to a video game or a crazy action movie or a thriller movie, but there's still quite a lot of stuff going on if you go out for a walk. But you are diffusing the energy. So if you were walking at a brisk pace, you'll have a moderate amount of stimulation coming in from what's going on around you, and you will be diffusing the energy mainly through the use of your leg muscles. But your whole body is involved in walking, so that's an example of a more balanced activity when it comes to stimulation and energy diffusion. Walking. It's very healthy, it's a great activity. People love to do it, but because it's not as mentally stimulating, it's not as addictive. So we might think it's boring. But if you do it, you'll probably enjoy it. So, sport or exercise. Now, this can be a highly mentally stimulating activity, especially in the case of something like sports. If you're playing something like squash and there's this ball just flying around at a huge pace, and if you don't get there in time with your racket to hit it, you lose. So you can see that you've got to have all your senses switched on. There's a lot of information processing going on. So it's a highly mentally stimulating activity to do. But you are physically exerting yourself at times to the full. To your fullest potential, you're physically exerting yourself. So it's also able to diffuse a huge amount of energy. So you notice that with walking, moderate mental stimulation, moderate energy diffusion in the physical body. Sports or exercise, high mental stimulation, high diffusion of energy. It's a balance. And last we have meditation, because I want to go to the other side of the picture. Super important is a low mental stimulating activity. If I sit down by myself in a quiet area and just focus on my breathing, do you think that will be exciting the mind? No, that's precisely the point. It's kind of like a fasting of, like when we fast and don't eat food, meditation is kind of like fasting the mind of stimulation and information. And that's what makes it so healing for the mind. It's such an amazing thing to do. So what is the energy diffusion when it comes to sitting quietly by yourself, watching the breath? Very low, right? We're not moving the body, we're sitting very still, but it doesn't matter because the mind is not overly stimulated. So it's low on the energy diffusion, but it doesn't matter because you aren't generating the stimulation in the first place. So if you start thinking about things from this kind of perspective, a lot more starts to make sense about which activities are balanced in stimulation versus energy diffusion. Does that make sense? I think it's pretty straightforward. And those last three activities, walking, incredibly good for you, balanced. Sport or exercise, incredibly good for you, balanced. Meditation, incredibly good for you, balanced. So I hope that this video helps you to concentrate on those activities where you can have a balance of mental and physical stimulation. So this is definitely not a video about you shouldn't stimulate your mind. That's not the case at all. It's just that if you're going to stimulate your mind at a high degree, you need to allow your body to diffuse that energy. Now, it doesn't have to be happening at exactly the same time, but that is pretty much ideal, as in the case of exercise. So you could watch the horror movie and that'll create all this sort of adrenal hormones and things that'll get you all revved up. And then after that, you could go and work out. So you could play a video game, get your brain all razzed up, and then you could go for a run. So that's going to work as well. It's just keep in mind that if you keep overstimulating your brain and not moving your body to process all of those hormones and that energy, it's not going to work out very well. Alright, thank you very much for watching this video. Please like it, subscribe to my channel, and I will be back with more videos very soon. Bye.